He looked at me, his eyes cold, and spoke each word like a knife driven straight into my heart. The child isn't ours. I was stunned into silence. 15 years. 15 years of love, care, sleepless nights, bandaging skinned knees, and yet, in a single moment, it all came crashing down. A child who wasn't of our blood, a husband who turned his back, and a horrifying truth born from a mistake 15 years ago in a cold delivery room. This isn't just a story of loss. It's a journey, a fight to hold on to what truly matters most. If you believe that love is greater than blood ties, if you have ever fought to keep your family together, then today's story is for you. Don't forget to hit like, share this with the ones you love, and subscribe to the channel to join me on this emotional journey. It was a Tuesday when Ethan casually dropped the words between bites of cold chicken casserole on his plate. I've always had doubts, Amelia. I think it's time for a DNA test. At first, I thought he was joking. 15 years raising Lucas together, the sleepless nights with colic cries, the school science projects, the frantic emergency room visits when Lucas broke his arm. 15 years of weathering life side by side. Or at least, I had thought so. I laughed. Don't be ridiculous. But Ethan didn't laugh. His jaw tightened. His fork clinked softly against the plate. His eyes cast downward as if he couldn't bear to look at me directly. What exactly are you doubting? I asked carefully. Exactly what I just said. I have my reasons, and now I need to know the truth. I wasn't sure what stunned me more, the accusation itself or the casual way he said it, as if we were discussing filing taxes or replacing the dishwasher. I met Ethan when I was 28, already too tired of the games of romance. He was reliable, if not romantic. A man who remembered to pay bills on time, who mowed the lawn every weekend without fail. Our life was never glamorous, but I had thought, at least, it was solid. Lucas was born a year after our wedding. Everything went smoothly, without a single complication. Ethan was in the delivery room, crying when he first held Lucas. The only time I'd ever seen him shed tears, not even when his own mother passed away. And yet now, that night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, watching the fan spin in the quiet. I didn't ask him why he doubted, nor did I scream or beg him to take it back. I just lay there, listening to the even sound of his breathing, as if nothing had changed tonight. 2 days later, we sat in the waiting room at Willow Creek Diagnostics. The technician who collected the samples was a young woman with a smile far too gentle, making me wonder how we appeared through her eyes. A tense couple? A cheating wife? A suspicious husband? When Lucas asked why we were seeing a special doctor, Ethan simply said, "Routine health check." I said nothing. I didn't tell anyone, not my sister, Sophie, who called me every night like clockwork, not my best friend Rachel, who never lacked opinions, especially about men, not even Dr. Carter, Lucas's pediatrician since he was 2. I just waited, and as each hour passed, it felt like a rope tightening around my chest, making it harder and harder to breathe. Instead of the estimated 7 days, it took 9 for the results to come in. 9 days, each hour dragging like a heavy, cold rain pressing down on my shoulders. Ethan barely spoke during that time. He left the house early, came home late, ate dinner in silence. No more goodbyes, no more love you before bed. The air between us felt cold and unfamiliar, like 2 patients sharing a hospital room but not bothering to speak. By the 5th day, I couldn't hold it in anymore and asked him quietly, "What made you start doubting?" Ethan didn't lift his eyes from the sports section. "A few things. Doesn't matter now. The results will say it all." That answer unsettled me, not just because of his familiar vagueness, but because I heard a chilling coldness in his voice, as if he had been planning this for a long time. I started to replay everything in my mind. Had someone said something to him? Had he heard some gossip at work or from church friends? But then I dismissed it. Lucas looked so much like him. The cleft chin, the brown curls, the furrowed brows when scolded. Still, something had cracked open. Eventually, I told Sophie. My sister reacted exactly as I expected. He's always been insecure, Amelia. Remember the piano teacher thing? That jealousy came out of nowhere, too. That had been over a decade ago. I thought Ethan had matured, but maybe some wounds only scab over, waiting for the right scratch to bleed again. Sophie offered to come over, but I refused. I didn't want anyone stepping into the grim space our home had become. Even Lucas changed. He spoke less, pushing peas around on his plate during dinner as if they might reveal a secret. "Dad mad at you?" he whispered one night. "No, sweetie," I lied. "Dad's just tired." From then on, I watched Ethan more closely. The way he checked his phone secretly in the garage, the way he snapped his laptop shut when I entered the room. He used to share everything with me, from boring spreadsheets to home renovation articles we never acted on. Now, everything was locked tight. Even the laptop had a password, something he'd never done before. The morning the results were ready, I couldn't even swallow a sip of coffee. Lucas was at school. Thank goodness for that. On the drive to Willow Creek Diagnostics, we didn't exchange a single word. His hand stayed steady on the wheel while I clenched mine until my nails dug into my palms, drawing blood. The receptionist greeted us with a too bright smile. "Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, right this way." The doctor was already waiting in the room. He had the look of someone about to deliver news that would change the course of lives. He didn't immediately open the file, but instead asked seriously, "Before I begin, I have to ask, are you prepared to hear what I'm about to tell you?" I looked at Ethan. He didn't blink, just gave a single firm nod. "Yes," Ethan replied, his voice low. I couldn't get a word out. It felt as if my voice had been dropped somewhere between the parking lot and the chair I was sitting on. The doctor opened the file, flipping through the pages, each turn sounding like a ticking clock, growing heavier and heavier. "According to the analysis," he said slowly, his finger sliding down a line on the page, "the probability of a biological relationship between you two is 0%. My ears rang. My hands went ice cold. For a moment, I thought I might faint, but there was no racing heartbeat, only a cold, numb emptiness in my chest, making even breathing difficult. Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaling through his nose, muttering, "I knew it." But the doctor didn't look at him. His gaze remained fixed on me, without judgment, without pity, only a deep, real concern. "There's one more thing," he said cautiously, his voice low, "something I, as a physician, cannot overlook." Ethan sat upright, his eyes sharpening. "What are you talking about?" The doctor glanced from me to Ethan, then back to me. "We didn't just test the relationship between father and son. As per procedure, we cross-checked with the mother as well, and—" My stomach twisted into knots. What? I whispered, my throat dry and raw. He hesitated for the briefest moment, then spoke words I would never, ever forget. "Mrs. Morgan, according to the results, Lucas is not biologically related to you either." I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. Surely I had misheard. Ethan's chair screeched loudly as he jumped up. "What sick joke is this?" The doctor raised a hand to calm him. "This is not a joke. We ran the test multiple times. The results consistently confirm. There were no errors in the testing process. Biologically, the child you have raised for 15 years is not related to either of you." Everything froze. The air, time, the entire world. "That's impossible," I whispered. "I gave birth to him. I held him. I nursed him." "I believe you," the doctor said gently, "and that's why I think you should contact the hospital where Lucas was born. While rare, there have been instances of newborn mix-ups." Ethan's face turned bright red. "You mean we've been raising a stranger's child for 15 years? The doctor remained silent, and that silence was heavier than any scream. We drove home without a word, but the moment we crossed the threshold, Ethan exploded. "I knew something was wrong," he shouted, "but this is beyond any nightmare I ever imagined." I tried to explain that I had no idea, but he wouldn't listen. His eyes were bloodshot, and he ground out each word. "You had one job, Amelia. One." Then he grabbed his suitcase and moved into the guest room, which now seemed destined to become his new home. That night, I dug through an old box of keepsakes, Lucas's newborn bracelet, his birth certificate, faded photos from the hospital. Me holding him, exhausted but glowing with happiness. I knew he was my son, but now I had no idea how to prove it. The next morning, I sat in silence over a cup of cold coffee. Ethan didn't come down for breakfast. I only heard the heavy footsteps of him moving upstairs. Without a word of goodbye, he left for work. After Lucas headed off to school, I pulled out the hospital file, my hands trembling as I dialed the number on the back. Riverbend Memorial Hospital. The phone rang 7 times before someone picked up. "I need to speak to someone about a possible newborn mix-up," I said, keeping my voice steady only because I had rehearsed this conversation hundreds of times in my mind. There was a pause on the other end. "Please hold. I'll transfer you to medical records." Then they transferred me to the administrative office. And then I was put on hold for 11 more minutes. Finally, a tired male voice came on the line. "You're talking about an incident from 15 years ago?" "Yes, early 2009. We only keep electronic records for 10 years. If you want to go back further, you'll have to file an official request. Maybe even get a court order." "A court order? Isn't it possible to simply check who gave birth that day?" He sighed. "I'm sorry. Even if I wanted to help, HIPAA privacy regulations prevent us from sharing patient information." "Protecting privacy? What about my life?" I hung up, my hands trembling. Grabbing my coat, I rushed to the car. If I couldn't fix this over the phone, I would go there myself. The drive to Riverbend Memorial felt like re-entering a nightmare. 15 years had passed. Everything had changed. New gates, new signs. But the parking lot was the same. I parked in the exact spot where Ethan had parked that night when he'd rushed me into the hospital, clutching my hand and promising everything would be okay. Inside, the hall smelled of antiseptic and burnt coffee. I made my way to the reception desk, struggling to stay composed. "I need to speak with someone in medical records." The young woman behind the counter looked at me awkwardly. "I'm sorry, without a court order, I don't need detailed information," I interrupted, my voice trembling. "My child may have been switched. I just need to know who else gave birth that day." She hesitated, then whispered, "Please wait a moment." 10 minutes later, a woman in her 60s appeared, wearing a name badge that read Diana Calloway, Director of Patient Services. She looked at me for a long moment before speaking gently. "I remember you." I froze. "You remember me?" She nodded, her voice low. "You were in room 207. Emergency C-section. Severe complications. We almost lost you. We moved into a private office. I poured everything out. The DNA results, the shocking discovery, the unshakable fear." Diana listened closely, without interrupting, then pulled a thin, fragile file from a locked drawer. "At that time, the hospital was transitioning from paper to electronic records," she explained. "Some documents were still left behind." "We still have the paper records," Diana Calloway said, as she let her finger glide lightly over the handwritten list of names and times. "There were 3 births that day, 2 boys and 1 girl. And you were the only C-section." My heart pounded so hard it was suffocating. Could there really have been a mistake? Diana sighed. That week was chaotic. 2 nurses were out sick, and the maternity ward was severely understaffed. I won't lie to you. Mistakes could have happened. But if you want to prove it. She looked straight into my eyes, her gaze stern. "You'll need a lawyer, Amelia. And quickly. If there was a mix-up, sooner or later, someone else will start asking questions too. I didn't go home immediately after leaving River Bend Memorial Hospital. I sat in my car, my hands limp on the steering wheel, watching the late afternoon sunlight drift down behind the row of old maternity buildings. A child, not of my blood, but still everything to me. I had given birth, or at least I believed I had. I had rocked him to sleep, nursed him through fevers, broken up schoolyard fights, and comforted him when his goldfish stopped swimming. Did blood really matter more than all of that? Even so, I needed to know the truth. I called Rachel. She picked up on the second ring, her voice anxious. "Amelia, you finally called back. I've been so worried. What's going on?" I almost broke down at the sound of her familiar voice, but I held it together. I need a lawyer, a good one. Someone who won't laugh in my face when I say I might have been handed the wrong baby at birth. There was a pause. Then she said, "You're serious?" "I'm completely serious. No more questions." Rachel just said, "Contact Noah Park. He's not cheap, but he's handled some incredibly complex hospital lawsuits." She added that Noah had once helped a family win millions when a hospital left a surgical sponge inside their daughter. The sky had turned a leaden gray by the time I arrived at the law office. Noah Park looked to be in his early 40s, sharp-featured with tired eyes. He didn't seem surprised as I laid everything out: the DNA results, the doctor's reaction, and Diana Calloway's cautious confession. "I've heard of 2 similar cases," Noah said, jotting notes into a yellow notepad. "In both, it took months just to access the hospital's birth logs. One family found their biological child 2 counties away. The other never found them." "And if the other family finds out first?" I asked. Noah looked me straight in the eyes. "Depends on what they want. Custody, visitation, or just answers. But honestly, this could get very messy and painful, especially for your son." I nodded. I hadn't said a word to Lucas yet. Every time I tried, my throat closed up. How could I possibly say, "You might not be our biological son"? Ethan didn't come home that night either. No texts, no calls. I didn't know where he was, and part of me didn't care anymore. He was drowning in his anger and blame, and I had to fight for our son. That night, as I sat with the old box full of faded photographs, I stumbled upon something strange. A photo taken right after the birth. I was still groggy from the anesthesia, and in the background there was a young nurse, blonde hair tied high, holding a newborn. She wasn't smiling. There was a look of panic in her eyes, and her name badge was tilted, unreadable. Behind her, blurred, were what looked like 2 bassinets. I flipped the photo over. Ethan's scrawled handwriting in black ink read, "Amelia and Lucas, January 4th, 2009. I stared at that date for a long time. Then I called Diana Calloway. That night, I asked, was there a young nurse, maybe around 20, blonde, thin? "I see her in a photo. Do you know who she was?" There was a brief silence. "That's Chloe Whitman," Diana said softly. "She had just started. Her first month on the job. Where is she now?" Another pause. "She quit 2 weeks later. No notice. No proper exit paperwork. Chloe Whitman vanished without a trace. No Facebook. No LinkedIn. No online presence at all. It took 4 days and a minor miracle from Noah's private investigator to finally find a lead. Chloe had changed her last name after marriage, Chloe Simmons, and was living in a small town 2 hours away, working part-time at a flower shop. I didn't wait. I drove there myself, the winding country roads as tangled as the thoughts in my mind. I had no idea what I would say. How do you even start a conversation like, "Hello, I think you accidentally gave me the wrong baby"? The flower shop sat between a diner and a bait and tackle store with pale pink shutters and a little bell that jingled when I pushed the door open. The scent of lilies and eucalyptus filled the air. Behind the counter, a thin blonde woman was trimming flowers. When she looked up and met my gaze, her hand trembled slightly around the scissors. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice small. "Chloe?" She froze. The forced smile disappeared. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" "I'm Amelia Morgan," I said gently. "I gave birth at Riverbend Memorial on January 4th, 2009. You were there." I saw the recognition, and then the fear, flicker across her face. I don't work in healthcare anymore. I don't remember you. I'm not here to blame you," I said softly. "I just need you to listen." She didn't throw me out. That was something. We moved to the back room, crowded with buckets of carnations and glass vases. She motioned for me to sit on an overturned wooden crate. She stood, hands clasped tightly in front of her. "I was only 21, she began, her voice trembling. "Just my second week on the job. The maternity ward was severely short-staffed. That night there were 2 deliveries back-to-back, one normal, one emergency C-section. That was me," I whispered. She nodded. "There was confusion with the bassinets," she continued. "We were supposed to double-check the ID bracelets and crib cards. But then someone from administration rushed us. The babies were moved to another room for observation." "I thought I did it right," she choked out. "I swear I thought I did." My stomach twisted painfully. "You mean—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "I didn't do it on purpose," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "But maybe I gave you the wrong baby," Chloe Simmons whispered, her voice breaking into sobs. But when I started to feel like something wasn't right, I went to report it to my supervisor. She paused, her eyes red and swollen, and they told me to stay quiet. They said if I spoke up, I would ruin lives, that it could just be a coincidence, that if I insisted, I could be sued. "So you quit?" I asked. She nodded. "Did anyone else suspect anything? Did anyone ever speak up?" I continued. She shook her head. "No one. But I remember there was another family that day. The mother had a natural birth. Her baby was very fussy, wouldn't sleep. She looked absolutely exhausted. Do you remember her name?" "I only remember her first name," Chloe whispered. "Haley. She had red hair. Her husband, I think, was a construction worker." "Haley. Red hair. Husband a builder." Not much to go on, but it was all I had. When I left the flower shop, my hands were trembling. In my hand was only an old business card, with Chloe's new last name scribbled on the back. I knew Noah Park would need to know immediately. But first, I drove home. When I arrived, Lucas was shooting hoops into the old, battered basket Ethan had never gotten around to fixing. "Hi, Mom," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Are you okay? You look tired." I nodded, forcing a strained smile. "Just had some things to take care of. Dad still isn't home." "I know." Lucas bounced the ball twice quietly. "Are you and Dad fighting?" I gave a faint laugh. "Something like that." He tossed me the ball. "Want to play?" I nodded. We played until the sun went down, just the 2 of us, laughing and gasping for breath. He might not share my blood, but my heart, my soul, they belonged to him completely. That night, Noah ran checks through every system he could access, searching for Haley with red hair. But Haley, red hair wasn't specific enough. Among dozens of birth records in the area from that day, only one name stood out: Haley Monroe, 24 years old, natural birth, discharged after 48 hours. The address was only 2 towns over. I gripped my phone tightly, my hands shaking as I dialed the number Noah provided. No answer. The next morning, I drove to the address myself. A 2-story red brick house in a quiet residential neighborhood. A glass wind chime hung by the porch, next to a small scooter. I hesitated for a moment, then knocked. A woman answered, her red hair loosely tied back in a bun, dark circles under her eyes. She watched me carefully, like a mother tiger guarding her territory. Hi. Sorry to bother you, I said, taking a deep breath. Are you Haley Monroe? Yes, that's me. Do I know you? I swallowed hard. No, but I think we gave birth on the same day, January 4th, 2009, at Riverbend Memorial Hospital. She stared at me for so long I almost turned and walked away. Then she opened the door wider. Come in. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cinnamon and soap. A teenage boy about 15 sat on the couch, headphones in, eyes glued to his phone. He barely glanced at me before turning back to his screen. That's Carter, she said softly. 15. Moody lately. Only eats beige foods. The boy didn't look much like her, but when he glanced up, there was something about the way he tilted his head, something fleeting in his expression, that made my heart ache. I gathered every ounce of courage I had. I know this sounds crazy, but I recently found out that the child I've raised for 15 years might not be my biological son or my husband's. Haley held her breath. We had a DNA test done, and there was a nurse who confirmed there was a mix-up that night. I rushed to add, I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want answers. Haley sank into the arm of the couch, cradling her head in her hands. I always suspected, she whispered. Carter's blood type doesn't match mine or Jack's. The doctor said it could happen, but there were other things. Her voice broke. His dark hair since he was little, and he doesn't look like anyone in my family. I stayed silent. Jack isn't good with unexpected things, but me, I always wondered. Jack, her husband, the construction worker, everything lined up. I'm not here to take Carter away, I said quickly. I just believe that I might be his biological mother. We sat in heavy silence for a long time. Finally, Haley asked, her voice rough, And my son? What's he like? I swallowed hard. His name is Lucas. He's smart, kind, a great basketball player. And he doesn't know yet. Tears welled up in Haley's eyes, her fingers gripping the edge of the armrest. You're the first person I'm admitting this to, she whispered. I always thought I was just struggling with postpartum depression. But now I think, deep down, I knew he wasn't mine. I wanted to break down and cry, to throw my arms around her. But I only whispered, Would you agree to a DNA test to confirm it? She nodded without hesitation. That night, I sat on the porch, watching Lucas shoot hoops in the fading sunlight. I tried to imagine Carter there instead, but I couldn't, and I didn't want to. Lucas was my son. No paperwork, no DNA report could ever change that. But I also understood, if the results confirmed my suspicions, we would be stepping onto a path we could never turn back from. Ethan still hadn't come home. 3 nights in a row. I checked our shared credit card account, a hotel bill from the suburbs, an expensive dinner, a bouquet of flowers. He wasn't alone. 3 days later, Noah called me. I have the results, he said, voice steady. Tell me, I whispered. Carter is your biological son, and Lucas is Haley's. I sank to the floor and sobbed until my throat burned, not because of the cold numbers on a report, not because of the confirmation, but because my entire life, everything I had believed in, had been built on a cruel mistake. I still hadn't found the words to tell Lucas. Every time I looked at him, I could only imagine that moment, the second his world would fall apart and I would be the one to push him over the edge. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just lay there, imagining Lucas's face when he found out the truth, that the mother he had loved for 15 years wasn't actually his blood relative, that the father who had abandoned him didn't even bother to look back, and that out there somewhere was a stranger, holding a part of our lives we never even knew about. The next morning, I called in sick and drove straight to the hotel address I had found in Ethan's credit card transactions. He opened the door, shirtless, a look of unmistakable surprise on his face. Behind him, a young woman with black hair, wrapped in a bathrobe, stepped out from the bedroom. She didn't bother to hide anything. "You're not even going to deny it?" I asked, my voice icy. Ethan scratched his head, avoiding my gaze. It doesn't mean anything." I let out a dry laugh. Hotel rooms, flowers, fancy dinners. Sure sounds meaningless to me. "At least she listens to me," he snapped. "At least she didn't lie to me for 15 years. The slap landed before I even realized I'd moved. My hand stung, but I didn't regret it. "I didn't lie to you," I said through gritted teeth. "I bled in that hospital. I held that baby, our son, and loved him with my whole life. A DNA test doesn't erase that. You chose to run, to hide behind the skirt of a young girl because you were too scared to face the truth." Ethan said nothing. He just turned and walked back inside, as if I were the one in the wrong. I left the hotel without another word. That afternoon, Haley Monroe texted me. "Carter's asking a lot of questions. I haven't told him yet. Maybe it's time." We agreed to meet on Saturday at a suburban park, somewhere quiet, somewhere private in case emotions spilled over. Saturday came, gray-skied and chilly. I told Lucas we were going to meet someone important. He wore his favorite hoodie, hands stuffed deep into his pockets. Haley was already there with Carter. In person, Carter was taller than I had imagined, lean and angular. When he saw us, he tilted his head slightly, a gesture exactly like Lucas's, when he was confused. The two boys stood facing each other, a heavy silence stretching between them. Then Lucas turned to me. "Mom, what's going on?" Haley's voice shook. "Carter, this is Amelia. She's your biological mother." The words dropped like a heavy stone into a still pond. I saw Lucas's brows furrow. I reached out to take his hand, but he stepped back. "What?" Lucas stammered. I knelt in front of him, my voice as soft as the breeze. "There was a mistake at the hospital when you were born. They switched you, but I didn't know. I loved you, raised you. You've always been my son." Lucas's eyes widened, full of confusion. "So, I'm not your real son? You are my son," I choked out. "Just not by blood." He took another step back. "And Dad?" I nodded. "That's why he left." Lucas turned to look at Carter. "So you're—" "Me?" Carter looked just as bewildered. "I guess so." No one said anything else. Only the wind moved between them. The days that followed were steeped in silence. Lucas barely spoke to me. He went to school, came home, locked himself in his room. No bouncing basketballs, no video game noises. I quietly left food outside his door. Sometimes it was taken, sometimes it wasn't. On the third day, I found Lucas sitting curled up on the front steps, his hood pulled over his head, knees tucked tightly to his chest. "Hey, honey," I said gently, sitting beside him. Lucas didn't turn to look at me, just stared into the dark street. "Will I have to go live with her?" "No," I said quickly, my voice breaking. "No one's taking you away from me. But she's my real mom." I placed my hand on his back, and this time, he didn't pull away. "She's your biological mother, maybe. But I'm the one who's been here. Every day. For 15 years. In every way that matters to the heart." Lucas wiped his nose on his sleeve. I don't know who I am anymore." I squeezed his hand. "Me neither. But maybe we can figure it out together." The next morning, I met with Noah Park again. He had already drafted the official notice to Riverbend Memorial Hospital, informing them we were pursuing a lawsuit. His voice was calm but firm. "They'll try to stall. But with the evidence we have, if we stay persistent, They'll have to settle. I asked, should we tell Haley? Noah hesitated. She might not want the same things you do. I'm not trying to take Carter from her, I said quickly. I just want to know him, to understand him. That afternoon, Haley called. Carter, he wants to see you. Despite the turmoil inside me, I couldn't stop myself from smiling. I agreed immediately. Ethan still hadn't returned home. No calls, no texts. I finally accepted it. And strangely, I didn't feel devastated anymore. I had lost the family I thought I had, but I wasn't going to lose anyone else. On a damp, rainy weekday, Carter came to our house. He stood hesitantly at the door, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, avoiding my eyes. I offered him something to drink. He shook his head, murmuring, I just wanted to see where I might have grown up. I gave him a quiet tour, the small living room, the backyard where Lucas shot hoops every afternoon, the wooden post with faded pencil marks showing Lucas's height over the years, the wall of photos, Lucas grinning in his elementary school uniform, Lucas and Ethan at the science fair. Carter lingered for a long time in front of one picture, me holding Lucas right after birth, my face flushed but glowing with happiness. I guess that could have been me, Carter said softly. I choked up. And it still can be, if you want it to. We sat on the sofa and talked, slowly, awkwardly, about music, about school, about hobbies. When he left, Carter hugged me, a stiff, clumsy hug, but a real one. That weekend, Haley Monroe called me. Lucas asked if he could come over for dinner, she said, her voice tinged with both surprise and joy. I smiled into the phone. And what did you say? I said yes. Of course I said yes. We agreed to let everything unfold naturally. No pressure. Just a meal. Just a small first step. Meanwhile, Riverbend Memorial Hospital had also responded to Noah Park's complaint letter. A carefully worded denial. Every sentence cold and cautious. They didn't admit any wrongdoing, but subtly hinted at the possibility of private settlement. A sign that they knew they couldn't hide forever. Noah looked at me, his gaze serious. We can push this to court. It won't be fast, but if you really want justice, we'll have to go all the way. I nodded without hesitation. We go all the way. As for Ethan, he never returned home. No apology, no conversation, just a divorce packet delivered through a stranger of a lawyer, a cold, sloppy signature at the bottom. Strangely, I felt relieved. For the first time in years, I no longer had to tiptoe around the shattered pieces of trust in my own home. One evening, I sat on the porch, cradling a cup of cold tea, quietly watching Lucas and Carter play basketball in the yard. Not brothers by blood, no longer strangers either. Just two boys, two lives, orbiting each other, trying to stitch together the pieces fate had once torn apart. I had lost a marriage. I had lost the certainties I once clung to. But I hadn't lost my son, and I hadn't lost myself. My belief that truth, however painful, is always worth facing. There are mistakes that can never be undone, but at the very least we can choose to face them or to bury ourselves under their weight. I chose to face them. In the end, I realized family isn't made of blood ties that bind us. Family is found in clumsy but sincere hugs, in quiet dinners filled with unspoken love, in evenings spent sitting on the porch, watching two boys, not connected by blood, but sharing the same heartbeat. I lost many things on this journey, a husband, an old sense of trust, but I found something far more precious, a family built with love, forgiveness, and the courage to face the truth. If this story touched your heart, please hit like to show your support, share it to spread the message of love and hope, and don't forget to subscribe so we can continue walking together through these emotional stories. I'll see you in the next one.